Hello and good night. Welcome to another bedtime story. This story is meant to help you sleep or to relax your mind. Try and find a comfortable place, such as your bed or a soft chair. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes now. Try and let go of the day as we begin our tale. Tonight's story is The Prince and the Pauper. Once upon a time, in the bustling city of London, during the reign of King Henry VIII, two boys were born on the same day, under vastly different circumstances. One boy was Edward Tudor, Prince of Wales, heir to the English throne, and born into wealth, power, and privilege. The other was Tom Canty, a pauper, born in the slums of Offal Court, where life was a daily struggle against hunger and despair. Though their worlds were separated by social standing, fate had plans to intertwine their lives in the most extraordinary way. Edward Tudor grew up in a world of grandeur. His every whim was catered to him by servants, and he was surrounded by opulent splendor. He was tutored by the finest scholars in the realm, learning history, politics, and languages, all in preparation for his future role as king. Yet, for all his privilege, Edward longed to experience life beyond the palace walls. The stories he heard of the bustling city streets and the people who lived there fascinated him. He yearned to see the world his subjects inhabited, a world he only knew from books and tales. Tom Canty, on the other hand, grew up in abject poverty. He lived in a dilapidated tenement with his abusive father, John Canty, and his kind-hearted but powerless mother. His days were spent begging for scraps of food or being forced to steal by his father. Despite his harsh upbringing, Tom had a vivid imagination and a deep love for stories of knights, princes, and noble deeds. He often dreamed of a life of comfort and adventure, far removed from the filth and cruelty of Offal Court. Tom's only solace was Father Andrew, a kind old priest who taught him how to read and write and filled his mind with tales of a better world. One fateful day, driven by curiosity, Tom wandered further than usual, making his way to the gates of Westminster Palace. His ragged appearance drew jeers and scorn from the guards, but Tom was undeterred. He craned his neck, hoping for a glimpse of the grandeur within. By chance, Prince Edward was passing nearby and noticed the commotion. Intrigued by the sight of a boy his own age being mistreated, Edward approached the gates and ordered the guards to let Tom through. Tom could hardly believe his eyes as he stepped into the palace grounds. The prince, struck by the boy's humility and awe, invited him inside. Edward asked Tom about his life, and Tom, though hesitant at first, recounted the struggles of his daily existence. Edward listened intently, horrified by the hardships Tom described. In turn, Edward shared stories of palace life, which Tom found equally astonishing. The boys quickly discovered they shared a striking resemblance, almost as if they were twins. This resemblance sparked an idea in Edward's mind. "Let us exchange clothes," Edward proposed, his eyes alight with excitement. "Just for a short while. I wish to see the world as you do, and you can experience life as a prince." Tom hesitated, worried about the consequences, but the prince's enthusiasm was infectious. Reluctantly, he agreed. They swapped clothes, and as they gazed at each other, they were astonished by how perfectly they could pass for one another. Edward handed Tom his royal seal, saying, "Keep this safe. It is proof of who I am." Dressed in Tom's rags, Edward slipped out of the palace, eager to explore the city. Meanwhile, Tom, now clad in the prince's finery, found himself surrounded by attendants who immediately mistook him for Edward. The bewildered boy tried to explain the truth, but no one would listen. His protests were dismissed as a jest, or worse, as signs of madness. Overwhelmed, Tom decided to play along, hoping Edward would return soon to set things right. Edward, meanwhile, wandered the streets of London, marveling at the sights and sounds. However, his excitement quickly turned to dismay. The guards who had mocked Tom earlier now treated Edward with equal disdain, believing him to be just another beggar. When Edward tried to assert his true identity, he was met with laughter and derision. "A prince, are you?" sneered a burly shopkeeper. "You'd better move along before I call the watch." Edward's royal upbringing had left him ill-prepared for the harsh realities of life outside the palace. He soon found himself hungry, cold, and alone. To make matters worse, he was accosted by John Canty, who mistook him for Tom and dragged him back to Awful Court. There, Edward experienced the brutality of Tom's life firsthand, enduring the scorn of Canty and the hardships of the slums. Back at the palace, Tom struggled to adapt to his new role as prince. He was baffled by the complexities of court etiquette and overwhelmed by the constant demands of royal life. Despite his initial fear, Tom's natural intelligence and quick thinking helped him navigate the challenges. He used his newfound authority to make small changes, showing kindness to servants and advocating for the poor. His actions earned him the admiration of the court, though some whispered that the prince's recent behavior was odd and out of character. Days turned into weeks, and both boys grew increasingly desperate to return to their rightful places. Edward, still trapped in Awful Court, finally managed to escape Canty's clutches. With the help of a kind-hearted vagabond named Miles Hendon, Edward began his journey back to the palace. Miles, though skeptical of Edward's claim to be the prince, took pity on the boy and became his protector. As Edward and Miles made their way to Westminster, they encountered the harsh realities of life in England. Edward witnessed the suffering of his people, the cruelty of the law, the poverty, and the injustices faced by the common folk. These experiences opened his eyes to the responsibility of kingship and deepened his resolve to be a just and compassionate ruler. Meanwhile, Tom's position at court grew increasingly precarious. The royal advisors pressed him to make decisions he felt unqualified to handle, and the weight of the crown became a heavy burden. Despite his best efforts, Tom knew he could not maintain the charade much longer. He longed for his old life, difficult as it was, and prayed for Edward's return. The turning point came during a grand ceremony to crown Tom as king. As the archbishop prepared to place the crown on Tom's head, a commotion erupted at the back of the hall. Edward, having finally arrived with Miles's help, pushed through the crowd and shouted, "I am the true Prince of Wales." The attendants gasped, their eyes darting between Edward and Tom. The resemblance was uncanny, and confusion reigned. Tom, relieved to see Edward, stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty," he said, "this is the true prince. I am but a pauper who took his place by mistake." Edward produced the royal seal as proof of his identity. The court erupted in astonished murmurs, but the evidence was undeniable. The king, though frail and nearing the end of his reign, confirmed Edward's claim, and the ceremony was halted. Tom, now free of the burden of kingship, felt a wave of relief. After the confusion subsided, Edward took Tom's hand and addressed the court. "This boy may be a pauper, but he has shown more wisdom and compassion than many nobles. From this day forward, he shall be my friend and advisor." True to his word, Edward rewarded Tom for his honesty and courage, granting his family a modest estate and ensuring they would never suffer again. Miles Hendon, who had stood by Edward during his trials, was knighted and given a place of honor at court. Edward's experiences as a pauper profoundly shaped his reign. He worked tirelessly to ease the burden of his people, reforming unjust laws and ensuring fair treatment for all. Tom, now living comfortably but humbly, continued to serve as a trusted confidant, his unique perspective invaluable to the young king. The story of the Prince and the Pauper became a legend, a tale of identity, empathy, and the shared humanity that transcends social class. Though their lives began worlds apart, Edward and Tom proved that true nobility lies not in birth, but in character. And so, they both lived happily ever after. The end. Thank you for listening to this bedtime story. I hope you enjoyed the tale tonight. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more audiobooks and tales to come. Until next time.